Hi, welcome back. So to recap what had happened, I made part one of this video, and I was discussing the causes for the color revolution. Back in the time period, I was getting red flags, and in regards to the information that was being spread about the color revolution. And in the back of my mind, I was thought that um, it was orchestrated and had some very nefarious interests involved. And so I always thought about it. I always thought that it was kind of like in the background of like the popular opinion, but I guess it was not. It was forgotten, swept under the rug. Nobody remembers, and the repercussions are being witnessed now of that. I think that it was a global change of order suddenly, easier than war. So I did a video. If you haven't watched part one, that was U.S. intelligence and the color revolution. This is part two, the media and the color revolution. Once again, I'm jumping into this article fresh. I have no idea what it's about, so we're gonna read this one through. The main source of information about the government of Edward Shevardnadze in Georgia was the Pt.2 television channel that was established in 1994 and became popular for its opposition to the official organization from 2001. Further television channels that did not support the opposition, including state-owned channels, willingly or not, gave moral support to the revolutionaries. A leader of the youth wing of the Rose Revolution stated that three actors played a key role in the opposition's victory: the Khmara, the movement, the political parties, especially Mikhail Saakashvili's national movement, and the Rustavi 2 television channel. Also, Saakashvili has a part in the Ukraine Donbass attack as well. Rustavi 2 part in the Rose Revolution may be characterized as the following: achieving an emotional rejection by society of the November 2003 election results, periodical use of the social survey and propaganda to undermine the government's reputation and build that of the new opposition, broadcasting information from the independent election points, boosting the ratings of the Saakashvili national movement, the leading opposition bloc, and strengthening support from the movement following the parliamentary elections of 2nd November 2003. Publishing independent exit polls, giving screen time to independent experts and representatives of Western-oriented NGOs, direct and continuous reporting for meetings and ensuring mobilization for meetings, reporting in detail on rising wave of protests around the country and calling people to join them after each new broadcast, regulating the organization of the movement of convoys of buses and cars from Saakashvili's district to Tbilisi, broadcasting documentary bringing down the dictator about the fall of Slobodan Milosevic's government in Siberia by the Bulldozer Revolution in 2000, General Secretary of the National Movement Vano Marabishvili told Western journalists. This film played a crucial role. Every protester knew by heart the tactics of the revolution in Belgrade because they had all watched the film. Everyone knew what they had to do. This was a better copy of the previous revolution. In Ukraine, the Russian-oriented ruling regime was struggling for power with the opposition, which is supported by the West. This confrontation culminated in the events of the Orange Revolution in the Ukraine in 2004. The advantage held by the oppositions were apparent in the struggle. Above all was their ability to put the internet media to effective and intensive use. Presidential candidate Viktor Yanukovych conducted a very active online campaign. The ruling party of the day was weak in the aspect, and even though it filtered the internet and blocked some websites, network media were prepared for that. They immediately signed up to foreign network zones, .com, .net, .org, changed their addresses for foreign ones, and organized copy servers outside the Ukraine. The internet has such an impact on the flow and outcome of the events that some researchers prefer Internet Revolution over the more widely used Orange Revolution. During these events, supporters of the Orange Revolution were active indeed in using the internet to break the information blockade and disseminate news to all citizens of Ukraine. The emphatic defeat of the Russian-oriented political forces in the Ukraine demonstrates the internet's undeniable role in modern political competition. Andy Kowaduk, subsequently leader of the Informacyona Ukraina political party supporting Yanukovych, stated that the change of power in the country was possible only thanks to the opposition's active work online. Previously, the great researcher at the Hoover Institute, Michael McFaul, had stated that the Orange Revolution can be considered the first in history to be organized on the internet. The 2005 Poppy Revolution in Kyrgyzstan also featured the media and internet in leading roles. In November 2003, the first independent publishing house was opened in Bishkek at the initiative and with full support from the American non-governmental organization Freedom House. Its director was the American journalist and Freedom House employee Mike Stone. Gene Harp's book, From Dictatorship to Democracy, which gives practical advice on how to struggle against regime, and My Capital News, MSN, the leading newspaper in opposition to President Askar Akiev, were published there with grants from the Western NGOs. The newspaper made the following important contributions to the preparation and realization of the Poppy Revolution in Kyrgyzstan. Publishing materials about corruption and falsification of election results in order to discredit President Akiev and his family. Calling people, especially youth, to the streets. Regulating the actions of protesters and uniting the opposition's political forces. Criticizing the regime with a number of public political talk shows, those being Our Time, No Going Back, on television. Using the experience of the Georgia and Ukraine and calling for rejection of the election results to discredit the existing government. The events of early April 2009 in Moldova developed in similar fashion to the general color revolution scenarios and were characterized as the Twitter revolution. This was because Twitter blogs, social network, and internet media were central to what emerged from the dissatisfaction with the low votes for different political parties were counted. They facilitated the center of the capital with aggressive protests. They facilitated filling the center of the capital with aggressive protesters, causing confrontations with law enforcers and loss of control over social and political situations. The Twitter revolution in Moldova did not achieve an annulment of the election results or the replacement of the ruling party, but despite this, it delivered a serious shock to the government. Color revolutions organized across social networks. The color revolution that took place in the Balkan and post-Soviet countries and the civil wars known as the Arab Spring in a number of Arab countries demonstrated that the social situation could be managed and directed via media and social networks. The Arab Spring civil war in many North African and Middle Eastern countries from 2010 to 2011, Egypt, Tunisia, Yemen, Libya, Jordan, Lebanon, Morocco, and Algeria, etc., particularly highlighted the importance of social networks in those countries. People who were shown setting fire to themselves online media immediately became symbols of heroism. Such events became catalysts for the Arab Spring in Tunisia and Egypt. Protesters in Egypt and Tunisia used the experience of the Euromedian in Kiev in posting various propaganda information and images on Facebook. Videos showing the demonstrators' courage and determination. Extensive information was disseminated about the victims along with demonstrators' demand for punishment of those responsible. Images were posted of victims of police violence. Lists of complaints about the government were posted as well as poetry, songs, images, and other revolutionary images. Detailed instructions were posted, also recommendation on how to protect oneself against tear gas, water cannons, electric batons used by the police in breaking up demonstrations. Research into these events show that, in fact, while the social-political process known as Arab Spring had political, economic, and legal causes, their escalation to civil war and the organization of social protests were facilitated by the social networks. The civil war toppled regimes that had ruled for decades: Ben Ali in Tunisia, Hosni Mubarak in Egypt, Muammar Gaddafi in Libya, Ali Abdullah and Saleh in Yemen, and the region was engulfed in civil wars and terrorism that continues to this day. The greater the use of social networks, the greater their influence. However, these networks were not the causes of unrest in those countries. The unrest was due to issues of socioeconomic and freedom. Considering that youth are the main users of social networks and in general favor innovation and freedom, we may contend that they are the force driving modern social processes. Social networks constitute mechanisms of social government that can transform dissatisfaction with socioeconomic and freedom issues into protests and manage them. Control of these mechanisms lies with the government and organizations that have hold on the ICT monopoly. In Palestinian, Blank is a Palestinian journalist from Syria who heads one of Al Jazeera's news offices and is regarded as one of the most influential representatives of the Arab world on Twitter. And she described the role of the ICT in the Arab Spring as follows: the principal characteristic of the Arab revolutions and the presence of unorganized people movements that included laborers, peasants, students, the youth, the elderly, women, men, the rich, the poor, and others, have only a small proportion of those people have access to the internet. Only some of them have a presence on social media networks. These revolutions would have happened anyway, with or without the internet. The internet has played an important role in the dissemination of information, the coordination of the events and discussions between upper tiers, but is neither the principal foundation nor the trigger mechanism for these revolutions. A characteristic feature of the role of social networks in Arab Spring is the high level of their engagement with the events of the Civil War and the demonstrations, not descending into chaos, but actually being well organized despite there being no obvious leaders. Journalists of the New York Times consider Gene Harp, whose works have translated into and who's considered the theoretical and ideological instructor of the color revolutions, the ideological father of the Arab Spring. His works were used in training by the International Center on Nonviolence Conflict in Cairo. The Tunisian opposition was instructed in his ideas, and his work From Dictatorship to Democracy is on the website of Muslim Brothers Movement. I take it to be the Muslim Brotherhood Movement. Not certain, don't quote me on that. The Egyptian journalist and social network activist Ibrahim El-Shaghat rightly states, social networks had an active role in modifying the youth ideological thinking. They opened new horizons for the revolutionary and civil ideological action as well as information sharing between different sections of Egyptian society. However, the task was not to change the ideological thinking of different layers of society in Arab countries, but also to test the role of the ICT in the course of the Arab revolutions and organization action. According to Moroccan political scientist Youssef Belil, without new means of communication, the protesters would have had great difficulties in coordinating activities. The spread of information, photos, and videos via Facebook, Twitter, blogs, and media networks enabled the creation of broad unity. It was no coincidence that Tunisia and Egypt were at the center of the Arab Spring, because the government in those countries had very weak social foundations. Socioeconomic concerns and questions of freedom were a major focus, especially for the youth, because the internet gave them a clear view of the lifestyles in European countries. Research revealed that 90% of Egyptians and Tunisians use Facebook to organize demonstrations and spread information. There are also socioeconomic problems and dissatisfactions in other Arab countries like Syria, Yemen, and Libya. But unlike Tunisia and Egypt, internet access in those countries was very limited. While in Egypt, 24% had access to the internet on their personal computers, in Libya, the figure was just 6%. There was some use of mobile phones as an alternative. Moreover, uninterrupted live streaming on the Western-oriented television channels like Al Jazeera and Al Arabiya, and the transformation of many mosques in Egypt into ideological centers of the revolution also played their part. It was also no surprise that after the triumph of the Arab Spring, the U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton said that the internet had become the public space for the 21st century, and in stressing that the uprisings were supported by Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube in the Islamic world. She added that the ICT accelerated political and social economic transformation. Henry Kissinger makes it clear in his book World Order that conflicts in the Middle East, rather than a struggle against international terrorism, have at their core a policy to distribute the region's energy market. Political scientist Philip Dors Vincent believes that the social networks and the information spread by Al Jazeera can help to increase the number of mass mobilizations and fill the public space with civil resistance. However, the fate of the protests depends on the results of the confrontation with security forces and the regime's ability to organize counter-demonstrations and mobilizing its own passive social base or support within the country. If such a mobilization is successful, the new means of communication lose their efficiency as a tool of organization. This means that the ruling regime, close to the people and upholding social justice, cannot be decentralized by ICT.